All right. Meeting is being live streamed. Perfect. All right. Now let me just head on over to YouTube so that I can see the chat and make sure that people feel like the sound is balanced. On the first day, people had given me some feedback that my guest microphone and my microphone were imbalanced and it was difficult to hear everything. So I'm going to pop into the chat now and ask people if they can house the sound. Dawn, can you say something?
Yes, it's good to be here. Thank you for having me here again. I'm just feeling really joyful today.
Awesome. I love that. That's great. Okay, so you guys heard Dawn speak, you heard me speak. How's the sound? You got to let me know if it's appropriate for you guys. Awesome. 108 Fate. Here we go is right. Shella Company, so great to see you. Jeanette Grube, welcome. Willie and Nancy Goudreau. Christine, great to have you here. She says the sound is perfect. Love it. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Well, you guys are in for a total treat as we kick off day 3 of Shadow Work Week. Shadow Work Week is a week I have put together of working on healing, integrating, and embracing, transmuting our shadow and our shadow energy so that we're able to step into greater love with ourselves and with those around us in our connections. The week is filled with wonderful mediums, coaches, and readers to support you in your growth. And as this is day 3, you can find the playlist so you can catch up in the Shadow Work Week playlist here on the K Moon YouTube channel. My name is K Moon, and I am a twin flame astrologer, and I'm a twin flame channel and Western astrologer. And on today, day 3, we are joined by special guest Dawn Maree. Many of you know her from an interview I did earlier this month with Dawn Maree. But if you're new to Dawn, what you should know is that she is an interplanetary guardian. And in her earlier interview, she explained what that meant. But today, we're going to talk about some other topics. In this lifetime, she came from an extremely abusive background, and she's worked her way into wholeness and a 5th dimensional energy bordering on 6. I'd almost say 7 at this point. She's currently a professional psychic medium, over 11 years of experience, and you will find links to all of her work in the description box below this video as we wrap it up. She's written 3 books to help you break through in terms of your sovereignty and liberation. And she's also a spiritual and relationship coach and business coach. She has a special emphasis at this time on twin flames, but I believe she says she will be evolving to do an expanded scope of work with light workers ready to change the world very, very shortly here. But we are grateful to have her here today to talk about healing sexual shame and sexual trauma in our connection so that we can be free to love and be intimate as it is our birthright. Dawn, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me here again.
Awesome. If you're just joining, please hit that like button. It definitely helps the content circulate. I love when you guys hit the like button so that it pops up in people's feed as they need to find it. So, Dawn, in our last interview, we talked a little bit about overcoming the energy of sexual shame and some of your journey. But for those who may have missed it or who are just joining, because there have been some new people from the other guests that have joined and subscribed to the channel, I'd love if you could provide a little context for this sexual shame that you've overcome so that the audience can recognize themselves in the journey that you're taking them on.
Okay. So, It began as a child. And if you have my autobiography, I just want to say before we begin this talk that there's going to be a lot of sexually graphic talking here. So if people are not comfortable with talking about sex, with talking about human body parts, sexual organs, then that's okay. Some people are going to be triggered. That's okay. Some people are going to feel relieved because it'll be an energy where It's like, oh my God, I thought I was the only one. You're not. Okay. So I just want to reassure people. First, I want you guys to understand I'm very graphically honest in my autobiography, and I'm very graphically honest about sexual energy, and shame and guilt. And I want to start this talk out with I read a book, and it gave a graph of an energy chart. So I just want to start off with this chart of the different vibrational levels that we are at any given time. Okay.
Hey, Dawn, do you want to share screen? Is that something you can share with us today?
Well, you know what? I didn't prepare. I should have done it, but
That's all right.
I didn't prepare a typed out sheet, and then I should have.
That's all right. You can
However,
describe
people
it to
can
us.
stop this video and write it down and then start it and stop it. However, just before we get into my journey, I want you to be able to write this chart down. And it's good because it commits it to muscle memory when you write things down. At the bottom of the vibrational list is shame, and that comes in at 20. The next step up is guilt. That comes in at 30. The next step up is apathy. That comes in at 50. That usually is the door to death. That's usually the door that we take into death. Grief is the next step up, and it's at 75. Fear is the next step up, and that's at 100. That's why if a person is grieving and they go up into a place of fear, they'll take themselves right out of a death point. Desire is a human want filled with fear, and that's up a step at 125. Anger is even higher, believe it or not, and that's at 150. Pride is a step higher, and that's 175. And then you put a mark right across the way. Everything that I just spoke about is in negative polarity. Now, we're going to go into positive polarity. Courage is the next step up, and that's at 200. Neutrality, the next step up at 250. Willingness, the next step up at 310. Acceptance, the next step up at 350. When you smoke weed, that's the next step up at 360, but I don't count that. That's a crutch that people use, okay? Reason is the next step up, and that's at 400. And by the way, I'm not saying weed is wrong. I'm saying if you use it too much, you use it as a crutch and you weaken yourself. So everything in balance. Love is the next step up at 500. Joy, the next step up at 540, and peace is the next step up at 600. So I just want to start off with that chart. And that's all, everything in that spectrum is positive polarity. Okay. So how I began on this journey was as a child, my first memory was a blocked memory of a sexual assault at 3.5. And then I went through my whole childhood of being shamed with more sexual abuse, being shamed because I thought that pregnant mothers were beautiful, and so I pushed out my stomach, and I was shamed for they thought, the people around me thought that I had been abusing the kids, and I hadn't. I just pushed my stomach out because I wanted to look like all the beautiful mothers that were pregnant. And I thought that if I just made room in my tummy, that God would put a child in my tummy. And I had no understanding of how the whole sex thing worked. So I was shamed because of that. And I was accused at a very young age of that. I was shamed because I watched people and they called it flirting. I was shamed because I was gifted and I watched people. So there was a complete shaming and utilization of guilt to control me as a child. And it didn't help, the physical, the constant, we called it spanking. It was actually beating. The constant spanking, beating, aka physical abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, and the conditioning of me to be subservient and submissive. That was my childhood. And then I went into my young adult life, and I was shamed because I didn't fit in. I didn't fit in with the rejects. I didn't fit in with the middle people, and I didn't fit in with the popular people. I just didn't fit in. Because I was gifted. I couldn't stand to be in class. So I would do all my work within 10 minutes, stop doing homework when I was a sophomore and aced all my tests. And then when I had done all my work in class, I asked the teacher if they needed me to run for anything. And so I was always in the hallways, and the monitor always knew me. So didn't care I was in the hallways because I wasn't doing anything nefarious. I was never in class. Still pulled a high, 3.75 average out of high school. But I was never accepted. I was shamed because I could never go to any of the events after school. I was never allowed to participate in sports. I was never allowed to go to any of the dances. I was never allowed to do anything after school. I would come home from school, do some work out in the field, and then do my homework and go to bed and start all over again. That was my life as a child. And that was my life as a young adult. And then when I became an adult, I was shamed. I was shamed because I had children. Finally, I was a mother, and I was so happy. And I was shamed because I had children and I wasn't married. I was shamed because my first boyfriend gave me a venereal disease, herpes. I was shamed because I had pushed my kids out so fast I had hemorrhoids. I was shamed. It was complete shame. So when my pivotal point, when I started healing, I was heaped. By the time I put myself in timeout in prison for trying to protect my children, I had built up this huge, massive mountain of shame around my body. I was shamed because I had a Buddha belly, because my stomach stretched out and I could never pull my stomach back in. So no matter how skinny I was, I always felt like I was fat. I was shamed because as a child, when I went through the abuse, I literally drank a lot of milk and ate a lot of food and made myself fat to insulate myself from anybody hurting me again. So I was shamed. So it didn't matter that I looked my best as I became a young adult. I felt fat. Because I had been shamed so much about the weight gain. So I had so much shame built up that by the time I put myself in timeout, and yes, I did put myself in timeout because I was not functional at that point, and I needed to heal my soul, or else I was not going to be any good to my children. And I'm so grateful for that time. And my parents took care of my children when I was in my timeout and healing. I'm so grateful every day. However, my pivotal point of dealing with all the shame that had been heaped up on me at all of my entire life, this huge mountain of shame, came to a pivotal point. Prison was easy for me. It was prison for women. I'll be honest with you guys. Prison for women is like a college with a huge fence around it. Federal prison, that is, because I was in a fed pen. So federal prison isn't, you get up 7 o'clock, you're out the door, you're to your job, and you can be out and about, except for the 4 o'clock count until 9 o'clock at night. You're in your bed and you go to sleep and you get all over and do it again. So it's really, there's a lot of freedom in a fed pen if you behave yourself and you keep to yourself and you don't get in everybody's business. So the pivotal point and the story I want to tell here is I have a nickname from my time in the fed pen, and my nickname is Boots. And how I got that nickname was I had gotten a really good job putting in Cat 5 cable in offices and TV cable in the offices, TV cable in and Cat 5. So we were called what you called ceiling rats. We were we did telephones and cables. I forget what it's not electrical, it's low voltage. We did low voltage work, the same as you would do with a telephone company or a cable company in the real world. So I'd gotten a really good job doing that. And I didn't want to be late for my job because I didn't want to be fired from my job because I loved my job. It really, everything in me is mechanical and analytical and computers, and I really thrive on that. So they had called count in the morning. It was dark, none of the lights were on, and nobody had come around to count, and it had been about an hour, and I didn't want to be late for work. So I got up and I really quickly put my pants on, and I was just pulling, I had my back to the door because there were no doors on the cells, and I had my back to the door and I was just pulling down. I just gotten my bra pulled down, and they just came out of nowhere and started doing a count. And so there was a guy that had come in to help the person that was in charge of the ward, the unit, and he was on my side coming down, because they would go down both sides of the ward to do count, and it was an upper level and a lower level, and they just come out of nowhere and started counting, and the guy was on my side, so all he saw was my back. That was it. And he went and he did the count. Well, he told the gal that was in charge of the ward that he had saw my back, and that I was trying to flash him, and there nothing could be further from the truth. I was trying to get ready for work so I wouldn't be late for work. And so the gal that ran the ward, she had a notorious history for writing the women up for just thinking that everything they did was for a nefarious purpose. And I got written up for indecent exposure. And I was like, are you kidding? I was getting ready for work and all they saw was my back. Are you kidding me? And she was serious. She wasn't going to let it pass. So I got called into the lieutenant's office, and I told him my story. I said I was just getting ready for work, and my intention was not for a male officer, a guard, to see me naked at all. I didn't want to be late for work, and it had been over an hour since they had called count. So I wasn't sure if they had done count or if they were going to still do count, and I didn't want to be late for work. And she made it stick. She said, well, we're still going to make this charge stick. And I was just like in the same PTSD of when the FBI were trying to profile me and say that I really liked what I did as a crime. That same PTSD, like somebody was getting inside of my head and telling me that I purposely was trying to flash a guard, started me shaking again. And I got fire, this heat coming from my feet and all the way through my body. And I started shaking, and I was like, oh, hell no. And something in me broke at that point, and I was not going to suppress it like I had before. I wasn't going to suppress it anymore. I was done. I was done. The floodgates came open, and I was like, well, if they're going to charge me with indecent exposure, I'm going to make damn sure I commit the crime, because that was not what I was doing. So that at that time, the prison was running through a tour of people through the prison. And I was like, what better way to get my point across than to strip down and show the lieutenant giving the prison warden and the whole entourage what indecent exposure was, and how I was egregiously misinterpreted trying to get ready for work. So I saw, I went to work, and I saw the warden with a whole group of people they were giving a tour, and I saw him. And so I ran, and I was like, oh God, I was so nervous, but I ran to the bathroom and I stripped down off of all of my clothes, took all of my clothes off except for my boots and my socks, because I don't like cold feet. So I'm butt stark naked. And I go to catch, and they had already went by, and I didn't want to run up to and catch them. So I nonchalantly get on the elevator. Well, this person that was going up to the lieutenant's office, that was a contractor, got on the elevator with me, and I'm just standing there like nothing's happening. And I rolled the elevator up, walked into the lieutenant's office, butt naked, with only my boots on. And the lieutenant said, yes, what the secretary got me. And she's like, well, why are you here, ma'am? And I was like, well, I was written up for indecent exposure, and I was just getting ready for work, and all the guard saw was my back. So I just came up here to show you what indecent exposure really is, because you guys are going to make the charge stick anyway.
So pause right there, because there's a lot to unpack here, right? There's so many different things. So When you shared that scale, I believe that's the scale from Power versus Force. Is that
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Okay. It's Power versus Force by David R Hawkins. It's a book that you guys can find. I'll link it below the video. But what you described, shame as being at the bottom of the scale. And it was like, when you get indoctrinated into shame, a family that holds shame, it doesn't matter if you're skinny or fat, if you go from fat to skinny, if you are abused or not, or if you started off not abused and go to being abused. It's like the shame follows you as a vibrational resonance, and it comes for you and it takes up residence in your world no matter what happens. But then what I'm also hearing you lay out for us is that the way shame just kind of escalates on itself as we're being shamed for certain things, then we try to climb out of the bucket of shame, then we just take on more shame, is what this sounds like. Is this what you're seeing?
Yes,
And how?
absolutely.
Okay.
And it's not, it's like, it's generational shame. It's collective shame. It's
Yeah.
cultural shame. It's racial shame. It's shame, gender shame. It's shame. The controllers shame us. They literally shame us from the time we're born. Shame for making mistakes. They tell parents that if you don't chastise a child and discipline a child if they've made a mistake, then you are a bad parent. So it's the controllers that programmed us to instill in our children from a very young age shame.
And so as we get into, what has happened here as you're in the penitentiary and you're starting your healing journey, and you're trying, to not be ashamed of being in the penitentiary and trying to heal, here comes this circumstance where you're accused of doing something that you didn't actually do. And it's like you hit your shame wall. Like you've been externally shamed and carrying the shame as far as you could take it. You'd hit your limit.
Yes, absolutely. I hit my limit. And that lieutenant, I looked him in the eye, and the secretary actually went and got the lieutenant, and the lieutenant, bless his heart, was such he was a good, ethical man. And he did not take his eyes off of my eyes. And he said, "What can I do for you?" And I told him just really point blank. I was written up for a guard, just seen my back because I was getting ready for work. I told him a short synopsis of it. And I said, that was not indecent exposure. And I looked at him and I was pissed. And I said, this, and I pointed at my body, is indecent exposure.
Dawn was ready to prove some points.
And he didn't drop his eyes once, not once. So they took me to a room and they gave me some clothes. And I got a week in the hole, which is basically prison inside the prison. And when I came out of the hole, I didn't realize how fast news traveled in the prison. This was a prison with thousands of prisoners in it, thousands. So, and you have to, and where you're held in the hole is separate from your normal unit, from the housing units. So I did a week. It was no problem. There's no sweat off my back. And I come out of the hole after they let me out. I come out of my hole, did my time, come out of the hole, and everybody on the yard started yelling, "Boots, boots, boots."
So you had her little reputation there for
So
that
that was like,
rebellion.
oh, okay, I am just not going to be ashamed anymore. It's worth it.
Well, what's interesting about this as you're relaying what's happened here is that when you hit that wall where you could not, you just were unwilling to be somebody else to tell you what you are doing. You were just unwilling to be gaslit into shame anymore.
Yeah, I was done. Yeah, completely done. I was over it.
There is something inside of you there's a piece of yourself that just decided no mas, not doing this, and came to your defense.
Yes.
Come hell or high water, you were going to defend yourself in the face of this external onslaught of being shamed by other people.
Absolutely.
Can you describe how people get in touch with that part of themselves who are harboring long-term, deep-rooted shame without
Mm.
needing to necessarily put themselves in a penitentiary and then have this experience.
Have to work
How
through it.
how do people get in touch with that part of themselves that comes to their defense?
Okay, so here's the thing is we are taught, like I was taught that I couldn't be angry. I couldn't be aggressive. I was a horrible person and I was not loving and kind and all the virtuous things that I should be. So I was taught that being angry was not okay. And especially women, but also men. If a man's angry, then he's aggressive and he's abusive. If a woman's angry, then she's a bitch. And that's how we're classified. We're taught that we're not allowed to feel our emotions. And one of the pivoting things is I had to feel that rebellion kick up, but then I had to allow myself to feel the anger so that I could defend myself. That it was okay to be angry, to defend myself from somebody that was constantly tearing my soul down and ripping my soul up. And at that point, when I was able to feel the anger, then I was able to literally put myself in a point where I was not afraid. So I went from anger and I just blew through pride and I went straight to the positive side of courage. But it took
Wow.
anger to jump me over into the positive side to courage.
Well,
And it
I
all
like
started with
this.
rebellion.
I like this because the access point to healing for you
Mm-hmm.
was giving yourself permission to feel angry,
There you go.
to be
Yes.
mad, to be
Yes.
upset. Why is anger the access point? Can you tease it
Because
out in even
anger
more specificity?
because anger, thank you, because anger is not a bad emotion, believe it or not. Anger is not a bad emotion. Anger is the doorway to stepping into courage. Anger is when you break down anger, we get angry because we don't have enough information to understand a situation, and then it culminates into frustration and fear. So anger is fear with aggression. It's like
Mm.
instead of running away, it's the fight part. It's not, you don't run away. There's no flight anymore. It's the fight. It's the turn and fight part. And that's the positive part when, especially when you're coming from victim mentality, you give yourself permission to fight for your own integrity, for your own well-being, and for the well-being of those that you love. So at that
Wow.
point, anger is not a bad thing, and the controllers have put it in a way where anger is bad. It's not. However, it can be very destructive if we use anger to control others. So there's the good and bad side of anger. However, there's always polarity in everything, negative and positive polarity. However, anger and the ability to experience anger is the most healing part, because you get the seed of rebellion and then you get the anger that pushes. It's like the rocket fuel that pushes you up into the courage to do something different and to keep doing something different to get different results.
So pause right there, because I want to add like a visual to this for our listeners, because I feel like you're sharing something that's really critical for people who are moving through deep-seated long-term shame. And it's so important that we don't gloss over the power that anger has to facilitate our healing. We like to think that anger is a negative emotion, that it has no place, that if we were really healed, if we were really evolved, if we really operated in love, if we were really light beings or doing light work, we believe that anger wouldn't be what we're experiencing. But that's not true. Let me just see if I can pull this up. I'm going to go ahead and share
While you're doing
screen
that,
so you guys can
I'm
see
gonna
this.
share something really quick. Now, here's the key to about experiencing anger. It's okay to experience anger without projecting it at somebody else. Take a wiffle bat to your bed, scream in your pillow, do something, go to the gym and punch a punching bag. And it's perfectly good and healthy to experience anger. However, it's really important that you differentiate that and you don't push it out towards somebody else, to
Well,
another
hang
living
on.
being.
And then that brings me to my next question about this, right?
Mm.
Because if we want to not share this or not push it onto another human being, that also includes ourselves.
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
here's the scale that we were talking about at the start of the session, right?
Yes.
This is again from Power versus Force by I think it's Richard R. Dawkins. Is that
Yep.
his name? At the very bottom of the scale, the lowest vibrational frequency that any of us can experience is shame.
Yep.
And the difference between shame and guilt is something I did something wrong. Shame
Yes.
is I am wrong, right?
Yes.
So here's shame all the way down here at the bottom. But in order to get up here to love, to joy,
Mhm.
you do have, look at all the things you have to pass through. And
Yep.
anger exists at a higher frequency
Yep.
than shame. And
Yes.
so if we're trying to just love ourselves through our pain points or just have reason about our or compassion for the abuse that's happened to us, we miss the opportunity. We do basically do a spiritual bypass in our
Yes.
healing. And what happens when you skip steps, Dawn? What when you've seen your clients skip steps?
It's
What do
not
you
real. It doesn't stick.
right?
It doesn't feel real. It feels fake. And this is how the whole council culture started. It's fake. You have to live in a facade and fake and put a facade or a fakeness out there because you haven't gone through all of the other emotions to get to the love, the reason, the joy, the peace.
Beautiful. Thank you for breaking that down. Okay, so we are going to get here in a moment to viewer Q&A. We got about 10 minutes before we go there.
Mhm.
But I'm curious, as you started to tap into that anger,
Yep.
were there moments when that anger turned in on yourself?
Yes. uh, from the I laugh about it nervously. There's a couple of things that I'd like to say really quick. I went through uh, I went through 5 years of probation, 5 years of healing my soul from all the shame. I also went through 5 years and 9 suicide attempts. 9 suicide attempts. 4 of those suicide attempts, I was declared dead on arrival, and they cried for my death. The doctors and nurses cried for my death. And I am literally a walking medical miracle. And that's what they tell me. And that is because my higher self said, girl, it is not time for you to go. So that is where I turn the anger in on myself. One of my biggest healing points was I actually saw a woman who had a big belly like I did and big boobs like me and big buttocks. And she was in a bathing suit and there was no shame in her being. And I'm like, I'm going to be that girl. I'm going to be that woman. I'm not going to have any shame about my bodies, any shame about sex. I am done being ashamed. So I went into a point where I was honest, and I had to be honest with my psychiatrist and the group I was in about what I was doing sexually. So I would just not talk nonchalantly in the group. And some of the guys would just fall out of their seats because they couldn't believe I was being so graphic. And then the other pivotal moment in my life was my twin's back was turned to me one time at an event. And I could feel the fear in him that he didn't want anybody to see him eat because he felt fat. He would feel fat if, especially me, his twin, would see him eat. And I used to have that fear. I had to heal that fear in me of people seeing me eat and then thinking I was fat. And this guy is like a bodybuilder. I mean, he's like sculpted, and he's still, and I went through that stage. I was a size 2. And because I had that overlapping skin on my belly, I still felt I was fat. And here this guy is chiseled. My mate is just totally, my twin is chiseled. And he still has this perception. I could sense that he still had this perception of himself that he was fat and that he was not perfect. And I just wanted to walk up to him and shake him and say, stop doing that. Stop it. It hurts when I see it. So there's a couple of very pivotal moments for me in my healing.
Beautiful. Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing it in these specific terms because like in order to come through the shame, it just the necessity of being willing to experience the grief, the anger, and to move through it and to find ways to not turn it inwards is just so critical. There's no
Yeah.
other way but to go through it.
Yeah. That is
Okay.
so true. Because when you turn anger in on yourself, self-sabotage can get really graphic and really harmful. And I didn't have just anger, I had rage. When I turned it in on myself, I was just like, you know what? I'm done. I'm out of here. Screw you guys. I'm going home. And I would take it out on my body.
Yeah. But you've come through this process. So let's talk about the strategies or steps that, let's just say somebody is on this journey right now: body shame, food shame, sexual shame from having been abused or for having done something that other people think is shameful. Uh, what is a step that someone could take today
Okay.
in their healing if they've faced what you've been through?
So I had a call today that was the example that prepped me for this answer, to give this answer. So I had a client call me, and believe it or not, you guys, you can Google me, and my criminal history is on probably the first page of Google. Okay, it's been there for almost 20 years. And so this guy calls me, and my client calls me. He's in an utter panic. He's married, and he got picked up for patronizing a prostitute. And his when he went to court, it landed just the court proceedings. He's just the initial proceedings. He's on the front page of Google, and he calls me panicked. And he's just like, oh my God, am I going to lose my job? Am I going to lose my wife? My wife doesn't know. And and my first response, because I've been through this, was I said, just breathe. And this is why I wrote the book, Walking in the Power of Transparency. I said, just breathe. You've got to learn to break down the fear, breathe deeply so that you can clear the panic that you're feeling right now. Everything's going to be okay. And this is just a lesson. This was just to get your attention to some dysfunction that came in because things weren't working out in your relationship. And all you need to do is be easy with yourself, forgive yourself, don't beat yourself up, go in, close your eyes, and start speaking very kindly with that inner child that's really freaked out right now, because he is freaked out. And I walked him through that. And I have training that I have listed below. And I had him walk through the training of the emotional energy flow and the resetting the core beliefs. And I said, when you show up for yourself in an emotionally supportive, loving, forgiving, committed relationship, at that point, you're going to dismantle all of this. And he called me today, and he had done everything that my guide Ephraim had walked him through. He called me today. He was able to be honest with his wife, because he had forgiven himself. His wife had forgiven them. Their relationship, his mate had forgiven him. Their relationship is at a much better place. Work didn't find out. He's starting his own business on the side so that he can replace the work. And then there was somebody that called and said, you need to do something about this because my neighbor said something about it. And again, it triggered a little panic in him. And at the same time, he's like, no, I'm doing the work. And if I do the work, I'm going to get more positive results. So he was able to transmute and say, no, I'm learning something. And it's not bad to learn. I should not feel shame or guilt for what I'm learning. And I'm really growing in a positive way. So nothing bad can happen because my law of attraction has changed, because now I've changed. And I've allowed emotional energy flow. I've done the soul work. I'm still doing the soul work. I'm changing the core beliefs. So I'm not going to attract anybody negative now. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And he called me today, just blessed me all to pieces. Ephraim was so proud of him. I was proud of him. I was like, that's what you do. You breathe until the panic lifts. And then you lovingly, and I have the video listed below of how you speak with your inner child, because a lot of times our inner child is freaking out. And the first thing we want to do is push that inner child in a closet and tell them to go away, because we're too busy trying to deal with life to deal with them. Well, what you don't understand is if you don't deal with that inner child, your life is going to get worse because the vibration of that inner child is what's pulling all the negativity to you.
So true, Dawn. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. So this was a lot of information with a
I
lot of
had even more. I
complexity to
just
it.
touched on it, but I'm glad. So literally I wrote it down. It's you go into rebellion, you go into experiencing anger, then you go into self-forgiveness, self-awareness, self-love, being your own emotional support. And so I have to write things down because I just totally spaced my list here.
It's
So
all good.
so that's the process that I go through, and it's called my book. That's what I wrote, Walking in the Power of Transparency. When you can walk in a place where you're totally, that's why I wrote my autobiography. I always refer everybody to that. When you can walk into a place of total honesty and total transparency, that is a power that very few people have, that very few people come into. But when you come into it, you can't put that genie back in the bottle again.
So let's just pause right there. For those of you who are listening, welcome. Those of you who just joined, welcome. We're going to move into the question and answer period here with Dawn. What I'd love for you guys to do is if you have questions for Dawn, go ahead and paste them in the chat now. But for those of you who are just taking all of this in, I want you to just take a deep breath. Together we'll do it. Just take a nice inhale through your nose. And a good exhale through your mouth. Take another one. And a good exhale. The reason why shame has the ability to trap us is because of the way we use fear to tell ourselves if somebody finds out how wrong or how bad we are, something worse will happen to us. And what Dawn has shared through her experiences and what her client has shared is that when you take the opportunity to be with the inner child and be with the reality that you're not wrong, you're having a learning experience, you didn't do anything wrong, your soul is experiencing and growing here in the earth realms, that's when you put the key back in your own hand for your own liberation. Transparency has the power to liberate in so many ways because it's the one thing that once you say what it is, it can the fear of somebody else finding out can no longer force you into hiding, into that low vibration of shame. So with that said, we will open up questions. For those of you who have questions for Dawn, go ahead and place them in the chat. Lynette says, can you please repeat the vibrational energy of the inner child is what pulls you into, and I think Susie Q answered healing within. Yes, is that right?
So the vibrational energy of the inner child is where your law of attraction is. So your higher self can be, like knowing that you're just going through a learning experience. But the fact that your inner child's freaking out is where your law of attraction is. So if you don't
Meaning
pay
your
attention,
set point.
yeah, if you don't pay attention to that inner child, you're going to get smacked with all the things that inner child is freaking out about and afraid of. You're going to pull it to you. So you really probably should take the time to address that inner child that's freaking out.
So true. Bridget Bowman asks, how do we forgive ourselves step by step and care for the inner child?
The beginning of it is to know at a soul's core level that there is no bad or good. There is negative polarity and positive polarity. And we've chosen to come to the earth to experience both so that we can grow in our soul's capacity. So the only reason every human comes to earth is for three basic reasons. And then we get more complicated into our soul purpose. But the three basic reasons are learn more, do more, be more. That's it. So if you can see that inner child as learning more, doing more, and being more, and as you can see yourself as an adult that you have learned more, and you can reassure that inner child that everything's okay because you've learned more, you've made the connection with your guides and your creator parents, and you've been set in a loving universe with support and safety. At that point, just take small steps in the state of, again, self-awareness. And the ability to forgive yourself is the ability to not judge yourself and to release any pain in your soul so that you don't stuff it down into the muscles in your body with negative emotions. So the ability to forgive yourself is your ability to understand and really feel and know that you're not wrong or right. You're learning. That's it. It's that simple.
I love that. Do you mind if I add a little bit of
I would
a
love
little
it
bit
if you
more?
did. Yes.
Awesome. When you look at the root of the word forgiveness, its original use in not just the English language, but language in general, had to do with the cancellation of a debt. And when you go further into what that looks like, what that sounds like, and how that gets expressed, normally we would have used it historically as a financial debt. But when we have to talk about self-forgiveness, what's going on there is a conversation about canceling out a debt that we believe somehow, some way we owe ourselves, that we took something from ourselves that now we have to quote unquote make up for, that we have to somehow provide a submission of something overgiven for something that was taken away. When we get to the place with ourselves where we can say, you know what, I did that thing, or I went through that, and I don't owe myself anything. I don't have to hold myself back from anything to make up for that. I don't have to take away anything from myself in order to make up for that. That is canceling the debt. When we've placed ourselves in these circumstances because of our shame, either because of things done to us or things that we have done, when we place ourselves in the circumstance of saying, yeah, I did that, or that happened to me, and therefore I cannot have, cannot do, cannot become, we have immediately put ourselves in debtor's jail. And when you cancel your own debt, when you say, yeah, I did that, or yes, I had this experience, it happened to me, and I can still have, and I can still do, and I can still become. It takes nothing away from me. It only adds to me. That's when we have canceled the debt. That is how you forgive yourself, is you no longer let the story of what happened or what you've done stop you.
Yes, that's true. And we do the same thing. They also control us. Like you said, you take that debt of shame, you take that, and one of the biggest other things that we're ashamed of is our financial lives. Why? Because somebody said we should be ashamed because we owe? No. If you can forgive yourself of that debt too. So that's what I'm saying. Forgiveness begins when you can release the concept of debt. You don't owe anybody anything. You owe yourself to have experiences and to learn from them, do more and be more. That's it. That's what you came here to do.
Right on. You don't owe anyone anything, and you don't owe yourself less.
There you go. Spot on.
So here's some other questions here, Dawn. 108 Fate says, I did Dawn's inner child exercise that she demos on her page, and it was hugely helpful. So we'll be linking that below. Thanks for letting us know, 108 Fate. Jennifer H says, how do I navigate sexual shame and intimacy in my twin and or other romantic relationships?
Oh, that's a fun question. I like that one. So here's how you navigate it. Especially when you're dealing with sexual shame. If you're feeling, okay, so I'll give you an example. As a child, one of the ways I was abused was the guy made me give him blowjobs. Okay. The abuser made me give him blowjobs. So I didn't enjoy blowjobs. I didn't like them. And I always felt like I was choking. So again, the rebellion kicked up, the anger kicked up that I couldn't enjoy a majorly pleasurable sexual activity, pleasurable for my partner. And if I was doing it right, it was pleasurable for me because I was making my partner happy. So there was a lot of shame around that. So I rebelled. And what I did was I practiced giving blowjobs, oral sex, oral gratification, however you want to say it. I'm just a little bit more graphic than the next person until number one, I didn't have the choking reaction that I had gotten. And I had overcome that and I had retrained my brain to not feel like it was in danger and to actually let it be pleasurable and enjoyable. And I reinforced it and reinforcement to where I not only enjoyed oral sex, but I was really good at it. And there's no shame about it, not at all. So the story behind that is I was in the group session with Doc, and I had my boss was sexually harassing me, and I was like, well, I'll just give him what he wants one time, and then he'll leave me alone because he wanted a blowjob. And I did it, and it just made him angrier. I thought it would calm him down, and it didn't. It just ramped up his energy and made him angrier. And I was like, well, I won't be doing that again. And so I went to the group and I told the group about it. And all these male sexual predators just about fell over in their chair. And I was like, what? And Doc said, well, why did you do that? And I said, because I could. Why not? I had to learn somehow that you don't give an angry man a blowjob. It just makes him angrier. So it's just like there's got to be a point in you where if you're feeling. The other thing is that when you're feeling shame, this is another thing too. Also, if you're in a sexual experience with your mate, you can do it that way, like I said, that first way. Or when you're in a sexual interaction with your mate and a memory comes up of abuse and you feel like you're living through the abuse, it's really important to stop sex at that point and allow yourself time to go with your inner child and address that freaked out child. And then once the emotion is cleared, like the tenseness and you kind of want to lock your jaw and disassociate. Once that's relieved and that inner child has been addressed, then go back into the sexual interaction. But a lot of times we push through it and it just re-traumatizes the inner child. Okay, so it's really important that you don't try to just push through it when your inner child's freaking out. And I literally had to reprogram because I was hardwired to a point where somebody had to be rough with me because I was raped as a child in order to really have an orgasm, because my brain had been hardwired as a child to be turned on and yet repelled and terrified all at the same time. So I had to reprogram my brain by having regular sex with my husband and reprogramming the pleasure point of having normal, emotionally interactive sex. And if I couldn't, to refrain from having sex, address my freaked out inner child and work her through that, and then come back to being intimate with my husband after that had been worked out.
Wow. Profound. Thank you so much for
And the other
sharing
thing
that.
that I will tell you is that if you're hiding shame, if you're hiding the fact that you're ashamed, if you're hiding anything, at that point, you're hurting yourself and you're a danger to others. And that's one
Why?
way that you can
Why?
tell if a sexual predator is still dangerous. They'll hide what they're doing. And we do that with ourselves too.
Such rich content. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
I'm looking here for some other questions. I think Lily Butterfly, I think Dawn just answered your question about how to align into the truth of no shame at all. Salma Suleiman asked, did Dawn experience things like shaking in the body uncontrollably when releasing emotions and beliefs? And can you talk about that?
Yes. Extreme shaking in the bodies when I was releasing emotions and shame. You know, believe it or not, one of my biggest healing moments was feeling a climax. So what happened was I didn't know the difference between a warm fuzzy orgasm and a climax. And I got the right partner and the engine was warmed up and my body started shaking and the emotion I felt was just fear, terror, and he didn't stop. And that was my experience of the whole. I literally screamed, woke my kids up, scared them. But it's the same way with release of emotions. So understand the reason why we're taught to feel shame about orgasms and sexual things is because we literally create the same way through emotions. So there's two ways that we create. When we feel intense emotions, it's orgasmic. Okay. And how do we create? We create through law of attraction, through attracting it, manifesting it, pulling it to us. But we also create, and our creator parents create this way, through orgasmic energy and energy and motion that feels so good that we just have this orgasm, this climax, and there is shaking when you release it. Okay. It's also that way with healing. So when you heal, oftentimes people don't understand when somebody's experiencing PTSD and the releasing of emotion, that's where the shaking comes from. It's all of this pent up energy, emotion exiting your body. However, that same shaking also happens when we're in orgasmic energy and in that emotional energy flow where we are at our most powerful in creating, and the controllers don't want us to know that because they don't want us to be more powerful than them, because they don't have that capacity of creating through orgasmic energy.
Awesome. Awesome explanation. And just so we're clear, orgasmic energy isn't just having a physical orgasm in the body, correct?
It is not. It's also having intense energy and motion, or an intense emotional energy flow. So there's different, it's all energy and motion. One of them's more sexually based and one of them is just intense energy flow or emotional flow.
It could be sexual, it could be emotional, it could be
Joy.
spiritual,
Yep.
intense, energetic flow.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, beautiful. Lisa Doroshenko asks, how can we show our inner child that we are loved and valued?
Oh, so I learned that when I was in prison, I didn't unblock the memory of me being sexually assaulted when I was 3.5 until I was in prison. And that was because the person that assaulted me died, and that was my stepdad. So I
Wow.
couldn't unblock it until the perpetrator died. I didn't feel safe. So what I did was I had a dream, and I knew he died before my mother called me and told me he died. But I had a dream that he had taken me as a little child and done horrible things to me, and he was carrying me on his back and I was all dirty. And then I ran up and I grabbed that little girl, little blonde dirty little girl, from him, and I ran away. I took him away. I took her away from him. And I begged my mom in the dream. I said, let's take her to the hospital, she needs help. And my mom was afraid of the perpetrator, which was my stepdad, and she told me, no, we can't, because he'll only get 10 months in jail. And so I brought the little girl to me and I gave her a bath in my dream, and I cleaned her up and I set her in my lap and I stroked her head and I spoke very, very lovingly to her. And that's how I learned how to visualize me really bringing my inner child back to me. And how I cleaned her up was I just took my hands and I put my hands, because I have a healing, I have the ability to heal people with my hands. And I just took my hands and ran them over from her head to her toes, her entire body, until she was clean energetically. And so that's how I learned. That's the beginning of um, how I learned to really allow my inner child to come to me, and to where I could feel her and heal her and clean her up and lovingly speak with her. I learned it from that dream. And when I woke up from the dream, shortly after that, my mom called and told me my stepdad had died. And I knew at that point, I not only unblocked the memory, but I knew who the perpetrator was.
And you had also healed it. You had
I
figured
did.
out the part of you that needed to complete the loop
Yes.
to come back home to sovereignty. You did that.
Yes. So a lot of times when we are hurt or abused at that age, our soul is fractured. That part of our soul is fractured and pulled away from us. And so throughout our lives, we'll oftentimes go back and take back those parts of our souls and reintegrate them back into ourselves. I had to do it with my teenager self, and I had to do it with a young mother that was abandoned and criticized and ridiculed for having children outside of marriage. So those parts of my souls I would bring back into myself and lovingly restore back to my soul.
Mm, beautiful. So it's a bit of soul integration work when
Yes,
you've
you
had
reintegrate.
trauma.
Yes, and that's why when you close your eyes and you address your inner child, not all the time is it going to be an inner child. Sometimes it's going to be an awkward teenager. Sometimes it's going to be a young mother. So that's why it's really important to ask the age of yourself standing in front of you, or next to you, and then lovingly reintegrate that part of your soul and interact with them lovingly.
Such rich content. Thank you for sharing this. We have one final question before we close out, and I will leave you guys with links below this video inside the description box, how you can work with Dawn, get access to her books and the processes that she's spoken about here so you can find them. But the final question we're going to take tonight is from Sarah. She asks, can you touch on releasing shame around the herpes virus?
Oh my goodness, that has been two of the biggest areas of shame that my clients experience are third-party relationships, been there, done that, and venereal diseases. So here's the thing, how you release shame is you understand there is like I have a natural cure for herpes. It's grapeseed extract. However, how you release shame around it is you understand that you came into a physically human body. And because you live life and you learn, sometimes that body is touched by an imbalance. When you heal the imbalance in your soul, you'll heal the imbalance in your body. So 90% right now of the human population has a herpes virus, whether it's the cold sores in your mouth or down below in your nether regions. 90% of the population has it. When you can be honest with a partner and say, hey, I'm going to be totally upfront, I have this, and give them the medical data. I can't give it to you unless I have open sores. I don't have any open sores. I don't have an outbreak. It's up to you whether you want to be intimate with me. And you can be totally honest with them about that without any shame around it. My first boyfriend gave me herpes from cheating on me. So I had to tell every partner after that I had herpes, and I got so used to it. I was just like, yeah, dude, if you want it, you want it. If you don't, you don't. Oh, well, next. So I got really good at not being ashamed of it. However, when I got really good at not being ashamed of it, and I was loving to my body, and I began to do the soul healing process, it became periods of being triggered and having a herpes outbreak became greater and greater, to where I almost do not experience any outbreaks at all, simply because I'm not triggered by the anxiety that causes the outbreak. However, if I'm around somebody that causes me to go back into any remnants of childhood abuse to an aggressive male or an angry male, if I'm around somebody like that, I'll have an outbreak, and I'll learn to release the trigger, and then I will stop having outbreaks. For like one time I went for 5 years without having an outbreak. So when you do the soul work, you literally bring that healing into your body.
Excellent. I actually used to be a safer sex educator. back in the day, you can transmit herpes if you don't have an outbreak. You absolutely can during the shedding cycle, and simultaneously, because so many people actually have it. Most
Yes.
people are already making antibodies.
Yep.
So there is that protection for them that's built in.
Yep. Yep.
Um, all of that to say, there's wonderful and amazing groups on how to have this conversation on the internet. Back when I was doing this work, the internet wasn't, aging myself now, the internet didn't have groups and conversation about this going on yet, but it does now. So if you are looking for support, and the best way to have the conversation in a shame-free way, and support groups, those do exist online. I just want to stop here and thank everyone who's been listening for being here. We covered so much territory and so much ground here tonight. You may need to listen a second time. Links for working with Dawn will be below. She does offer private sessions through her website, but you can also get access to her books and read her whole story, as well as the resources and tools she provides for being able to overcome shame and integrate those fractured pieces of self back into the whole, below this video inside the description box. Just give me a couple minutes to make sure I link it appropriately for everyone. I want to stop and say thank you to my guest, Dawn. You were excellent. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
joining me a second time this month.
Yep.
If you missed the sum total of Dawn's story, you can catch it in the video that we did earlier this month. I will also link it below this video. But this particular piece of the conversation today was deeply focused on the healing work that you can begin to do. And whether you're called to work with Dawn or with somebody else, if shame is something that you're troubled by, please get support to get yourself out of shame jail. Whatever you're ashamed of, whether it happened to you or whether you did it, don't live in shame. It is the lowest possible vibration, and you can climb up the vibrational scale. We've provided some access to resources today, more in the description box below, but definitely give yourself the opportunity to cancel the debt and cancel out having less than in life. Shame does not have to run your show. Once again,
Okay,
my
so
name is Kay Moon. Yep.
can I say one thing before we end?
Yep.
This is so important. It's just such an important piece of energy that I got to share it, and I got to leave it in the last thing in your mind. In a twin flame connection, and this is why I've remained celibate until I can be with my twin flame. That's not for everybody. That's just for me. However, in a twin flame connection, we're all worried about our bodies. Okay. That's not who we are. It is an extension of our soul. Okay. So here's the thing, in a twin flame connection, your twin flame is attracted to your soul. So you could literally, you have this energetic energy that overlays your body. That is your, so it's called soul beauty. So you could be burned and scarred to a crisp. As long as you can open your eyes, your twin flame will think you're the most beautiful person on the face of the earth. That is the beauty of a twin flame connection. It's so important for you to understand that loving somebody at a soul level is way different than somebody loving you at a surface level because you got a hot body. Okay. And that's what we should all be shooting for, that soul love, that love of seeing each other as souls, all walking each other home. And it just doesn't have to be your twin. It can be a soulmate. It can be soul group. But really living life in an existence at a soul level really helps all of this. Your life has been, your body has been touched by your life on earth, just melt away, because you see people at a soul level and you love at a soul level. And that transcends everything in the physical. That's all.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Love really does have the ability to transcend all. Thank you for leaving us on that note, Dawn. And
You're
thank you
welcome.
all for being here. If you'd like to know more about Shadow Work Week, head on over to my community section or click the trailer video for the channel. You'll get the full lineup. You'll know who's coming tomorrow and get access to who's already been interviewed. We go through next Monday, the 28th, and I'm so excited to share this content with you. My name is Kay Moon. I am a twin soul channel and Western astrologer, and I'm so grateful you were here tonight. Take great care, everyone, and bye for now.